Pre-recorded live and broadcasting from their undisclosed location in the Bremerton suburbs, Sam Kramer.
Wild and free.
Mark Boutte.
They just rammed that move controller ball deep.
Two geeks on a quest to hear themselves talk as often as possible. This is the Gaming Disquisition.
The Gaming Disquisition with Sam and Mark for Sunday, May 19th, 2013. And show number 51 is go. I am Sam.
I am Mark.
This is the Disquisition.
And we have, and always will be, your Disquisitor.
Yes, that is, well, you know, for all time, really? That's an awful large commitment.
And always will be. Live long and prosper.
Right. And I don't think that there's a line that comes after that I can continue.
No, I believe
quote.
Spock just dies.
Yeah. So, spoilers!
What? Yeah, okay. Anyone who has not seen that, whoops.
Oops. It
Okay.
is to be quite fair though, that like of all the Star Trek movies, like that is probably the best.
Yeah, easily.
And it was like I think I finally kind of realized that when I was probably like 18ish when I kind of watched it again. Mm-hmm. By the way, speaking of which, did you know that Sam, Disquisitor Sam, in fact,
oh dear,
was in fact born to the ending credits of that movie? Like
what?
That's a thing that happened. So here's my mom in the hospital, right? And
this is a family show.
Yes, it is. And so she's having me like right there, but there's a TV screen in the hospital, and Star Trek 2 is on there. And evidently, my dad is so like fascinated with watching Star Trek 2 rather than watching my birth that like my mom had to like basically punch him to get his attention again.
Okay, in his defense, I think I would find the end of Star Trek 2 way more interesting than your birth.
Oh, come on. You can watch Star Trek 2 any old time.
Yeah, and it would still be way more interesting than your birth.
You know, you are a person that makes me angry.
There we go.
Even more appropriate than usual.
I was going to say, it's still way more interesting than your birth. No, of course, I'm actually thinking about going to go see Into Darkness.
Yeah?
Because
they are continuing that reboot now.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
And I've heard good reviews, and I'm probably going to go take my mom to it for Mother's Day, and it'll be a thing, because she's, a Star Trek fan. So.
Man, I would like to take my mom to watch Star Trek 2 sometime, just for the irony.
Oh, yeah, that'll probably be awkward.
Yeah, a little bit. But if you're going to be born to any ending credits, Star Trek 2 ending credits are really good,
I suppose. As long as you're not, like, sitting there sitting there watching it with her and, like, nudge her, like, hey, Mom, way more interesting than my birth.
And she would laugh now.
I see.
I think I'm not sure how my dad would react. I think I have no idea if he still feels any guilt over that, or if he ever did.
I don't know. I wouldn't.
Man, Sam seems so neglected as a child. How you doing, Mark?
He says drinking a beer, watching Star Trek 2. I'm doing all right. Living life, living the dream.
The dream, the podcasting dream, where we talk on the internets once a week.
We talk on the internets. Spreading the good word of the video games and such.
Video games? More than just the video games, though.
Yeah, I'm actually have to say I'm ashamed.
Ashamed?
I have to. I think this is a time I have to make I have to get this off my chest.
Okay.
The other day I broke down and Sam.
Yes.
I prestiged.
You did what?
I prestiged. We were playing Call of Duty, and there I was, and I was at the max level, and I couldn't help myself. The lure of leveling up again with a different emblem, and then it went further. I prestiged my weapon.
That's a thing?
You can. Now I have a machine gun that has a gold paint scheme, and it has my clan tag and my personal emblem on it. I just don't know who I am anymore.
Mark, it's okay. We can get you help. There are support groups. There's millions and millions of people out there just like you.
Are there? Normally, I see 8-year-olds with diamond-encrusted AKs, and I see people with absolutely no lives that have prestige to the far end, and I look at that and say, is that me? Will that be me someday? I don't know if I can stop. I'm almost max level again. I want another emblem, Sam. I want another one. I want the boar and the tusks and the crossed guns. I want the snake leaping from an explosion.
Is he looking at the explosion?
No, he's looking away from the explosion.
Oh, he's a cool snake then.
Yes. But I've started working on a shotgun. And reticles. I have a mustache reticle. My reflex sight has a mustache, Sam.
Reflex I should never have a mustache.
I knew that once. Maybe the next Call of Duty game. Maybe I'll hold off.
I think that would be best.
Yeah. Well, maybe I want graffiti.
We'll talk.
So how you doing, Tim?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
Yeah, that was a good talk. So, at any rate, so Call of Duty. Yeah.
Yes. Apparently there's another one coming out, probably November.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More mustaches, apparently.
Maybe. We'll see.
Perhaps a handlebar.
It's entirely plausible.
At any rate. So yeah, I had a great week myself.
Yeah, I had friends visiting again and, got to run around doing stuff.
Yeah. So one of my other, this seems to be a thing now where I invite all of my D&D peoples to have a crack at visiting the Sam, I suppose.
Yeah.
Cause nobody can, we can't seem to get them all here at once for another live game. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, aside from them all breaking down, having fits of, broken limb and other such.
There would be some sort of weird health singularity that would spontaneously break everyone's limbs.
Yeah, it's true. Health singularity, not some masked guy with a baseball bat running through the room just to prove the irony.
So yeah, I was so my friend Joy visited me, and we
listener Joy. We've talked about her quite a bit.
Yeah, she's a person who writes into the show sometimes, and
quite often, every week, I believe.
Basically every week. So she came by, and we did all sorts of interesting things. Not the least of which, and probably my favorite part of the whole week was when we went wine tasting in Woodinville.
All right.
Yes, that was the thing.
We went wine tasting.
Yes.
Wow.
So joy is that word that means that you like wine a lot.
A sommelier.
Probably yes.
Well, okay.
I think that she said that once.
You could be a wine connoisseur without being a sommelier. Sommelier means that you are a wine expert and that you actually go places and you provide wine pairings with different foods and such.
Okay, so I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and say that she is one.
Oh, okay.
Except she's not, probably.
I'm curious.
But as far as my own experience, she's basically one of those.
Fair enough.
And so we went over to Woodinville.
Woodinville.
Wheel Wheaton.
Yes. Wooden Whill. You went there to drink wine and eat cheese and chocolate, didn't you?
We eat some wine.
Wine.
So anyway,
cool whip.
What's kind of funny is that we actually anyway. So we went there, and there's apparently a lot of wineries out there. A lot of hole in the wall is not really the right word. Basically, hobbyist wineries, but to the point where they have their own stuff to make it with.
Yes.
And there was This all began actually with the first night that she was here. We went out and picked up some wine just to kind of get started on this.
Uh-huh.
And so so she started instructing me so this is what you do. You first smell the wine and you roll it around your tongue and you do whatever. And what was kind of interesting was so the first thing that she picked out for me. After it took us a little bit to figure this out, and it took some back and forth because the scent of the wine was the first thing that came into my head was baked good. So,
wow. All right.
And so it's some kind of baking kind of thing. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, I think maybe there's maple or something. Mm-hmm. And then Joy says, I can see maple syrup being part of that scent. And then suddenly I was like, wait a minute, this is pancakes with maple syrup and melted butter.
Uh-huh.
And then she goes, no, this is French toast. And that's when we realized that we had like basically the scent of French toast sticks in this wine of all things. And like it was that moment that I realized that like, holy crap, there is a lot more to wine than I ever thought possible.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
This is crazy.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I know you're a pretty big fan of most, a lot of microbrews and various other things beer-wise.
I'm making my way through those, but then again, I'm making my way through the beer world without really like having someone to kind of guide me. So
right.
there's a lot of like kind of guessing for me.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said about the various different types of wines out there and all the different, peculiarities here and there, and the different methods of going through it. I've learned a little bit over my years, but I've never actually gone to a wine tasting. We talked about that actually the other day, and like maybe we should do a group trip, and I'll go have wine and drink, and eat chocolate and eat cheese and try wines, because there's up north actually, across the Hood Canal. There's a decent amount of wineries up there around Sequim and Port Angeles and that area. So I mean, there's a lot even closer than Woodinville. Doesn't require a ferry.
Yeah. So we had a great time doing that. It was like I feel as though the way that I enjoyed that experience was actually very similar to how I approach music, of all things. Because the way I like to what I like about
sounds
music,
like French toast sticks.
I know it does, doesn't it? But like what I like about music, though, the thing of the music that I do like is when music is like really complex and really just like it's very layered, and like there's all sorts of like weird hidden things kind of going going on for me to kind of think about and unravel. And well, it's
more like an onion.
It's more like an onion. Yeah. It's like an ogre anyway.
Right.
So like after I have spent a lot of time with the music, I can like pick apart all of its layers, and then from then on, my enjoyment of the music is basically me enjoying like my like having done so, and now I can like I remember thinking about that and like figuring out like that there was a weird time signature here.
Right.
And
yeah.
So it's just this big intellectual experience, and like the way that Joy explained wine to me is it's very, very similar, because you're basically trying to like decipher all of the individual flavors and the timing and the ordering.
Oh yeah, the same could be said with a lot of scotches, various alcohols actually.
Yes.
And realistically, you can almost take anything to that level.
Yeah, you can even take like the like pictures of like some senator eating sandwiches, and pick out like which ones are the best photos of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, realistically, any thing could be picked apart and turned into this ridiculously deep and involving thing where you now suddenly have an interest in finding out like what kind of wood grain that they used in this park bench, and how this park bench differs from that park bench because it was made 13 years before using this wood from this area of this place.
So what I'm trying to avoid is like, so there's a Penn and Teller episode of BS where they talk about they talk about bottled water, and they were trying to debunk the whole thing about like, well, how bottled water always tastes better, which isn't necessarily true. And so to kind of prove the point, they took a whole bunch of people into this restaurant and they brought forth a water steward. And so he basically presented them with all sorts of like really finely named waters, like like Everest, Park or something like that. Yeah. And they would present like these waters in like the most pristine of like containers, like in little ice like containers or whatever, and talk about where they come from. And like they even presented one with like there was like this dead spider in the bottom that was supposed to like somehow confer extra flavors. And so they got all these people to like try to notice the differences between all these really exorbitantly priced waters.
It was all tap water,
and it all came from the same garden hose.
Yeah.
So so what I'm trying not to do in terms of like artistic things like wine or music or whatever is I'm trying my hardest not to see things that aren't there, and not to like be overly like pretentious is the correct word.
And you really got to watch out for that, because they've done a lot of tests over the years where like they'll take really some of the best sommeliers in the world, and they'll have them do blind taste testing, and it's like, oh yeah, this one's so much better. It's this from this area and this time. And it's like no, that was boxed wine from Safeway. And it's like, oh well, you done passed one over on me. Good for you. And I guess that's just. you really got to figure out, what it is you enjoy about it and why, and what things you get out of it, rather than trying to be like some crazy wine snob running around going, oh yes, I know more about wine because I've done this and this and this, and that's when you start getting into trouble. But, there are people out there that are pretty darn amazing. If you can find a job as a professional taster for some of these like coffee places or wine places, like all you do for your job is taste and spit, well, you've made a good living there.
Taste and spit sounds like the Futurama Oktoberfest, if you recall.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of what they were making fun of. Watching how it's made for coffee. You got the man who sip, spit, sip, spit, sip, spit, all the different things, and he's like, oh yeah, grade this by this one, by this one, by this one. You got to assume that guy's just like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Well, this is the Gaming Disquisition, where we go head to head on topics important to everybody.
Yeah, mainly sommeliers.
We tell it like it is.
By judging each individual flavor by its own merit and combining them together into a symphony of taste.
And it all ends up with us saving the world.
With wine.
With wine.
Several bottles.
Actually, more like, to be honest, our forte on this show is saving the world with whining.
Yes, seriously.
But enough whining for now. Actually, no, not enough whining. Not nearly enough.
Not nearly enough, because we're opening the mailbag.
Oh, sick burn.
Oh man, you got some ointment for that burn?
So, if you would like to be burned by our sickness, and
because we have a fever.
Oh man, that came out a lot worse than I thought it was.
Burned by our sickness. There's an ointment you can get for this. The prescription brand Twit Face Mail.
Oh, we are on a roll. All right, if you'd like to get a hold of us in our Twit Face Mail Plus, you can get a hold of us in our email at gamingdisquisition@gmail.com.
You can reach us on Facebook, facebook.com/thegamingdisquisition, or on the Google+.
Get a hold of us on Twitter at DisquisitorSam.
At DisquisitorMark.
On Twitter.
Tweet, and of course you can reach us on our YouTube channel as well.
Our YouTube channel.
YouTube channel. Yes.
We have a YouTube channel now.
Yes, search for us on YouTube, The Gaming Disquisition, episode 50 up now, episode 51 coming soon.
I believe that it's just like youtube.com / The Gaming Disquisition. I think. Last I checked, I was just let me see what I can find here. But I went over there the other day just to see what was going on with that, and it seems like it's pretty well put together. We could probably
we got some other things to do. I mean, it's still technically under construction, as most of our stuff is. But on the other hand, if you just go to YouTube and type The Gaming Disquisition, or probably on the Facebook link we'll have up by this evening, you could of course just go there. And we don't actually have video. It's basically just a static image with the podcast, but that's how it is. We may surprise you though. There might be an image of us, so you guys can see the magic of podcasting.
Yes, you can certainly do that. So if you'd like to go check it out, you can check us at youtube.com/channel/UCXKAUJ3WBDBDOYA4ATW.
Right, or just search The Gaming Disquisition, like you do on the Google Pluses.
Yay!
Moving on!
Dugga-dun. So, Chris on the Facebook writes, my roommates and I used to play MTG Chandelar all on our individual laptops at the same time. The game was as much about bragging about our decks as actually completing objectives. I strongly encourage anyone who can track it down and get it working on modern hardware to give it a try. And he posts later, no, I'm sorry, I'm in no way done gushing about Chandelar. This game is better at being Magic the Gathering than the actual card game is. I mean, the idea of Magic was that collecting was part of the game, but in the real world, cards cost money, and there's a secondary market, and getting new cards just stops being any kind of fun at all. But Chandelar lives in the magical fairy tale land that exists inside your computer, where everything is made up and the points don't matter. So you can run around playing games for Andy and not care about losing your cards when things don't go well. It's like being a kid again and discovering TCGs for the first time, but without the attendant drain on your parents' wallet. And you really, really must give it a try. That from Chris.
I vaguely remember playing that for a very short amount of time. I didn't have any friends playing it, and I just kind of, at the time I was just getting into Magic, and I'm like, I kind of like having the feel of the cards, and I kind of got into the Type 2 stuff for a very brief period, but, I might get into it again later on just to play with some of the old Type 1 cards that are just, still exist in that game.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I would imagine that Wizards of the Coast would be strongly discouraging of you trying to play that game again because, it's not correctly monetized for them. And
I don't think they'd care about people playing a game that just barely exists on the internet now.
Well, I'm not saying that they would take offense to it, but they would definitely want you to play one of their more recent offerings.
Well, of
I would
course,
imagine.
Yeah, makes sense.
Joy on the Facebook writes.
Hey, there's Joy again.
So the Griffin game. Yes, we used an Awakened template, although all the other characters were intelligent humanoids, a pixie, a genie, genie, and a naga. After discussing the merits of a griffin folk concept, kind of like spider folk, we opted for the following concept. The GM had set up a story where a collection of monster races were hiding out in a forbidden plane. The griffins were originally, perhaps somewhat inexplicably, brought to the plane by nagas for use as transportation. Then one day, a sorceress decided to awaken her griffin companion and accidentally awakened all the griffins.
All the griffins?
All the griffins. They rebelled against their former masters. This made for a fun kind of tension between my griffin character and the naga character. The GM also gave my character the ability to speak, not canon D&D, but still fun. That from Joy.
Okay, yeah, answered my question. I mean, I have further questions that kind of revolve around the idea of if you have a pixie, a genie, a naga, and a griffin in a group.
And they all walk into a bar.
Well, yes. I guess less to the point of storyline-wise, and I guess my curiosity then extends to the how did you deal with ECL with having a genie character that, well, effectively can grant wishes? Depending on the type of genie, of course, but the idea being is when you have multiple different monster types, ECL does become an issue.
I am a little curious to see, like, if they just had, like, basically some sort of guide to how to characterize the creatures rather than just take the straight character stats.
Actually, as a matter of fact, there's Savage. What was it called? The Savage Races or something like that. That was a 3.5 source book made by Wizards at the time. That actually was all about monster characters of various different kinds, although the vast majority of those ones were all humanoid or at least intelligent, and they did have the Awakened template in there. So, yeah. I mean, it's something that I guess at that point it's just, it's academic. I'm just curious to see how you ran it. Because like I said, I've run those before and I've been in them, but almost every single time it's always been the group is already all intelligent, basic monster races, orc, goblins, trolls, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of when I was playtesting some system that involved like various scopes of playing D&D. Like there would be like the people playing on the character level, but also a person playing on like a faction level, where like they'd be in charge of like the whole like
Savage Species. That was the name of the book.
They'd be in charge of like the whole city or something like that. So basically, what would happen is like you would have how did I do this? I think what I did was I decided to run one of the factions as part of the playtest. But what I did was I basically set up an elven city with a Leyland in charge of it. And then if you wanted to be part of my city, like I had a whole bunch of like basically monster races that you could play. And basically be like, if you want to play like a level 3 thing, you're like a merfolk in my river. Right. Or like, I even went so far as to have like, basically invent this story of how like the Leyland outsmarted the genie and tricked him into helping the city do something. And the genie was so impressed that now he just like offers his services just to like be around this Leyland and like learn about her, basically.
Well, everything can be explained away with story. That's one of the greatest things about D&D is the fact you can have your griffin be this from the other thing and all that. I mean, that's the greatest thing about it. But I guess I was curious as to how you guys were working along the, the point of, well, you are a group, I'm assuming saving the world in some way or fashion, and you are a griffin that can talk. So I suppose if that worked, it works, and, more power to everyone who does sort of that.
Why not be saving the world? That's our job. Anyway, so we have a question we had a question, and you answered, and that question went like this.
What's the coolest or most ridiculous thing you've seen for sale? And did you buy it?
And Kevin on the Facebook writes, as for cool things I've seen for sale, while I would like to say an unopened copy of Ocarina of Time.
Thanks, Kevin. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's actually correctly
That's how
pronounced.
we spelled it.
Or something else really neat. I will talk about Pink Godzilla. Why? Because last time I was in the shop, not only was I able to buy a launch title Dreamcast free of all copy protection, I also, while talking to them, discovered that even in 2011-2012, they still produced a small number of Dreamcast titles, including Space Channel 5. So yes, I also bought a brand new copy of Space Channel 5 over a decade after its release. How is that for production life? That from Kevin.
I wasn't aware they were still producing Dreamcast games.
It is one of those like best kept secrets because nobody wants to talk about the Dreamcast.
But it's thinking.
What?
Really? You don't remember that?
No, I don't.
It's thinking. That was the Dreamcast thing. Like it came up like all the commercials, 9/9/99 release date. It's thinking.
I don't remember those commercials at all.
Yeah, I remember lots of
Evidently, them. I don't watch. Evidently, you watched far too much television as a child.
I was also, I believe.
Oh, you were probably working.
No,
for
my sister was working for GameStop at the time.
Okay,
that software, etc.
That would do it.
Yeah, so
So Dan on the Facebook writes, in response to this week's Inquisition, I've seen a lot of crazy and awesome stuff on sale before, but nothing really stands out for me at the moment. However, this is just about the cutest thing I've seen for sale, and he links something.
Oh, it's adorable.
One of your ponies.
It's a Sweetie Belle chibi plushie. It's adorable.
So there'll be a link in the show notes if you would like to see this thing, and if you are, the legal department to Hasbro, you might be very interested in seeing this.
Yeah, well, of course, this plushie is fan art. All rights to Sweetie Belle and My Little Pony belong to Hasbro Inc. Yeah, that's not going to save you.
Well, see, the funny thing is, fan art is not covered, but the thing is, is this really for sale, Dan? Is that because I didn't see the ability to buy it?
Depends. Sometimes you can contact them and they can make one for you.
Okay,
it's kind of like how our listener Diane was making the little D&D plushies, and then she got contacted by Paizo and is now selling her the Diane's Dungeon little plushie. Monsters and stuff, now selling them on the Paizo site.
Yeah, we saw I saw some of those entries just the other day. Mm-hmm. Wasn't there also some concern about not making, say, a beholder, because that's not folklore, that's actually Wizard of the Coast material?
I'm not 100% sure, because beholders are... It's kind of iffy. There are other monsters that are kind of vaguely similar.
So Beholder, I am thinking the right thing with all the eye stalks, yes. Right? Okay, because there is Basilisk was the other weird thing I was thinking.
Basilisks have been around.
Folklore. Yeah, so those are probably safe.
There are some things that could probably be looked at and said this is only D&D, but I'm not 100% certain which ones.
So Ruth on the Facebook writes, the most ridiculous thing I have seen that was ever for sale was the giant blue heart at WSU. Is it art? Yes. Is it good art? No. I'd heard the stories about this being sold, auctioned, whatever, and eventually found the story about it being sold on eBay. $15,000 for this? And she links a little news article on the WSU site.
Giant blue heart.
Okay, so let me explain this, because I actually did go to WSU for a while. So there's this piece of art called the Technicolor Heart. You'll see... Yeah, you're looking at it right now, but it's this gigantic blue heart with a whole bunch of multicolored tools and wrenches.
It looks like the gum wall.
A little bit like the gum wall, not quite as dense, but and there's all sorts of random crap just stuck all over the thing.
Right.
So this was definitely there to make some sort of artistic statement, and it was commissioned. I think it was commissioned, in fact, either that or just bought out right after it was completed. And this thing was a source of so much controversy amongst the students, because there was the people who said that, it's an eyesore and it's out in the middle for everybody to see and no one wants to see that. It's really it sucks as art. And there are people who are saying it's not art. And then there's the people who are saying, if you take it down, that's censorship, which it's kind of not, because you can choose to put whatever you want anywhere you want. But there was so much strife over this thing all the time. It always came, and eventually what happened was basically someone made actually this happened a couple of different times. Once on Craigslist and once on eBay, basically selling the heart, even though they had no claim to do so.
Yeah.
And they were, and eventually they actually did end up getting bids on it, but of course they couldn't, go and take it or anything.
It says the winning bidder was advised to come with a shovel in the dark of the night and remove the piece.
So yeah, it was kind of awkward, but it was definitely an artistic piece, and in some ways, there are some people who are saying that actually it looks like the Technicolor heart did exactly what it was supposed to.
Yeah, so all things considered, the heart did its job.
Yeah, so
sparked controversy.
Foreshadowing. Oh. Anyway, Lisa in the email writes, several years ago, I saw a flux capacitor for sale online. It was a step above even the original movie prop, as it was fully wired with standard plugs to run its neon lights in a variety of patterns, and had extra detailing in its sculpting and construction. Sadly, the price was well over $300, not including the outrageous shipping costs. And nifty as it was, the price just wasn't worth buying. Especially since, despite all of its awesomeness, it would do nothing to make my decidedly grandma-like Chrysler LeBaron any cooler.
LeBaron, yeah,
that's what I said.
LeBaron,
yeah, the LeBaron.
Ugh.
I still kick myself over not investing in it, though. My family's car collection now includes a genuine DeLorean, purchased entirely for the Geek Out factor. And as if fate has conspired against us for its own sadistic pleasure, the flux capacitor is no longer on the market. So much nerd regret. That from Lisa.
Oh, yeah. We've actually been looking... Instructables.com actually has a how to make your own flux capacitor and kind of do all that stuff. If we ever get all the parts together, we're totally going to make one, because her dad does have the DeLorean and is doing all the wiring and everything right now.
So I've only ever seen that thing just kind of like sitting under a tarp. It has it has been worked on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So.
And not only that, actually, we were up there the other day, and we got some of our friends who were visiting from California actually got to sit in it and take pictures in it and post. And
cool.
So, yeah.
Is it going to have like the whole like heads-up display and everything eventually?
I don't think he's going that far.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
As much as I love that car, I'll never be able to drive it because my 6'4" frame does not fit. When my feet are crammed in there at a very odd angle and my head is resting on the ceiling.
Yeah, so your one chance to do actually any time traveling, and it will never happen.
Yeah, that. By the way, for those of you who've never actually seen a DeLorean, when I'm standing, and again, I'm about 6'4", the tallest part of that car is a hand's breadth below my belly button. That is how short that car is.
Wow, I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, it is ridiculously short.
So that's all we have for this week's Inquisition. But we have other questions that are inspired by other things that are in fact sent by other people.
Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, Habadakis sent us a nifty link for something called the Campaign for Real Monopoly.
So those of you who are kind of in like game making communities and are kind of in the know, as it were, are kind of aware that Monopoly is widely regarded amongst game aficionados as being a really generally terrible game,
as opposed to say like Chutes and Ladders, which everyone agrees sucks.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
But Monopoly is one of those things where you really can't remember the last time you played it for serious.
Because you can't play it for serious. Like, it's just, it's got these big, long, boring sections at the end of the game when the winner's really already been decided.
Yeah.
Like, who gets what is still kind of random for the most part because, like, there's all these, like, any time when you have to move some number of spaces based off of a dice roll should already be a red flag of, like, basically the game being totally random.
Yeah, but this actual post is pretty interesting. It's from criticalmiss.com. And it's got some really interesting pieces of information here, like talking about, there are ways we all played Monopoly. There's like that house rule that everyone knows, like, for free parking and stuff like that. And that's just ways that we made the game more fun. But there's also one that a lot of people do not remember, or at least don't think is actually part of the existing rules.
I can't imagine how this happened, but, like, I realized that he was right, that, like, I never played with this rule, even though I remember back in the day having read it. For some reason, we ignored it, and I can't for the life of me figure out why.
And this rule, by the way, is something that comes into play when buying property.
So here's how this rule works. Anytime that someone lands on a property and does not want to buy it, then the play doesn't just pass to the next person. That property is then immediately auctioned off to any player who wants to buy it for any price,
including the person who passed on it. Meaning, technically, if you, for example, land on Baltic and say, I don't want to buy it, the bank then says, all right, this is now up for auction. Now bid. There's no starting bid. There's no like minimum. You can say, I'm going to pay $5 for it. Oh, I'll pay 10. I'll pay 50. I'll pay and even the person who passed on it can then start bidding and effectively might even be able to pick it up for less than it was originally costing.
Or more.
Or way more, depending on how much everyone else wants it or wants to drive up the price. Now this takes Monopoly from a game of, oh, he landed there, he bought it. He landed there, he didn't buy it, but I have to land there to get it, into a bidding war and intellectual war of, do I want this piece? Do I not want him to have this thing, and how much is it really going to be for all these people to get these things? And there's strategies out there, and there's all these different things that come into play,
which unfortunately don't matter at all.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, this article seems to be of the opinion that like this totally changes the game of Monopoly, and it changes it somewhat, but it doesn't fix it. And it makes the game like marginally less terrible. But the problem is like the biggest problem with Monopoly outside of its randomness, which is still
pretty
bad,
significant.
But one of the biggest problems that isn't fixed by being able to auction off properties is the fact that the game is 100% optimizable. Like, and so I'm gonna link this article in the back of the other one as well. But this is an article by name of "How to Win at Monopoly: A Surefire Strategy," wherein he just basically takes a whole bunch of he takes all the different color groupings. And then he makes a table out of how many turns on average it would take to get back the money that you paid for it, whether it be the property or the houses or the hotels that you put on it.
The article he's going to link, by the way, is by Tim Darling, and it was posted at amnesta.net about in 2007.
So we've known, probably even even before then, but like this is the first article that I found. We've known that this game is optimizable, and all you need to do is like just consult this chart to see where your priorities should lie. And that kind of defeats a lot of the game's hidden strategies or whatever, because like it's impossible to hide from your opponents which properties that you actually want, because the ones that you actually want are known.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, just going down the list and seeing all the charts that he's put up saying like these properties will pay off over this time and this much, and this is how much the break even time of having these properties versus these properties, and the fact that the railroads are probably the best thing to have ever, and the utilities are the worst thing to have if you pay full price for them. And of course, this is all assuming like these break even times are assuming that you did pay full price for the stuff, because you can break even much quicker if you only paid $10 for the actual property.
Right.
So I mean, but the fact is that there's a very simple strategy that goes, and then talking about the best starting positions and yada yada yada.
I mean, it's very well calculated to the point where like it even takes into consideration like the different community chest and chance cards that you could get, and factors all of that into the average number of turns it would take one other person to win back all that money, let alone like multiple people playing with you.
Yeah, how many times have you seen the chance card go to nearest railroad? Well,
yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Those railroads become way more useful, including those community chests and chance cards. So, and of course, he does pose an interesting question: why would a man push a card that he doesn't own to a hotel that he's not staying at?
I see.
Yeah, but honestly, it does go to the point where if the game is optimizable, I mean, this is just stuff that. Well, obviously, Monopoly has been around for a long time. There's been a lot of people going over it with a fine-tooth comb, trying to find all the stuff about it.
I mean, the only way that Monopoly is really playable is if you don't know any of this and you play with other people who don't know, because then the game feels like there's this possibility space. Yeah, but even then, it's still kind of
but if you're gonna play this game with people who also don't know all the optimization strategies, and by the way, I kind of want to play Monopoly now, and I haven't actually read through the optimization strategy, so please play with me, friends. But the other side of this, though, is that playing with the auction rule does seem like it would breathe some life into a game, and it would be a different experience. In the original article, he does talk about the fact that why is it that no one plays this? Well, consider a family unit playing this: mother, father, and 2 children, and then how is the bargaining skills of the father versus his children? When someone passes on it, and it becomes a bidding war between the children and the father, which ends in tears, and the wife giving the man the look of "you're not having fun."
Well, so the problem with Monopoly then becomes basically like, who is this for? Because like the randomness suggests it's for kids because it's trying to mitigate player skill. But like the complicated bidding war suggests it's for something more than kids.
Well, maybe it's the fact that all of us as kids played without that bidding mechanic because we were kids and we didn't care about the randomness. I mean, that's what we wanted and whatever. But
really, I just wanted to collect a bunch of money. I think that's where I got my initial love of spreadsheets.
Sure, there we go. But I mean, I guess now as adults playing Monopoly, it has that extra flair to it that I think would make it at least a little bit better to play.
But there's all sorts of ways that, like, I mean, with games being what they are, really just collections of rules. The introduction or the subtraction of some particular rule, like it could change. It could stand to change game dynamics very significantly.
As a matter of fact, when we talked about this in one of our main topics about introduction of house rules and such like that, the way that it can completely and utterly destroy whatever you have set up just with the inclusion of a tiny minor change.
Yeah. So we decided that we were going to formulate a question based off of both that topic and this one, and that question reads a little something like this:
When did a simple rule alteration completely change a game?
That's not how I wrote that.
Because you said change twice and it's stupid.
Fine. Alteration it is.
Yes.
So, this week's Inquisition: when did the simple rule alteration completely change a game?
I actually have a good one for this.
Okay.
I remember back in the day playing Counter-Strike a lot on various lands that we had either at people's houses or down at Wizards of the Coast when we used to do Counter-Strike tournaments.
Uh-huh.
And the one little alteration we made was to the gravity.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah. Just minor change to how high you can jump versus how much friction you have when you're on the ground and all these other things. Just a minor change to that makes the game so much more, different.
Awkward.
Actually,
I want to ask this right off the bat. So Counter-Strike has those really super supposedly hyper realistic, can't change your direction in midair and whatnot. So how does low gravity interact with that?
A lot more sniping happened. As a matter of fact, having to figure out where people were. Now, people would do this for various different things because you'd fall a lot slower. So people would jump and get themselves into a corner in a room, like in an upper corner, and wait for people to enter the room and then shoot them. Or in some of the large open areas, there was a ceiling, and you would hit it and just kind of slowly glide back down to the level. And if people weren't looking up or paying attention, well, they would probably get just murdered from above. Or if they were paying attention and happened to look up and see this little dot floating slowly towards the ground again, and a predictable arc that they can't change, it's like, oh, here he comes, oh, bang, done. And there were even some levels that were, I guess, so badly designed that there were, like, shelves in the air that, like, if you jumped up, you would actually land on nothing slightly above the level and just be like, haha, and just kind of do that sort of thing. So just altering the gravity a little bit is enough to completely throw off every strategy you've ever had in that game.
It's totally true, because like just the fact that like now everywhere becomes a viable sniping spot.
Pretty much.
Like it's wow.
Yeah, it was definitely a very interesting way of playing it. And we did it from time to time. And then, of course, there were times where we'd, like, increase player movement speed and lower the gravity. So everyone's just zooming around the map at impossible speeds, jumping high, like, completely just bypassing every tiny little, like, thing that's supposed to get into your way. And firing at people who are moving at 200 miles an hour through the air became very difficult.
I imagine. And then, I mean, what happens to your weapon spray even at that point?
It's ridiculous.
Yes.
One shot every 20 feet as you're going full auto past somebody.
I wonder if you could potentially, like, it's, because I guess probably not, because Counter-Strike works on hit scans, so you couldn't hit yourself and, like, by outrunning your own bullets or anything like that.
I don't believe in that one you could,
yeah,
although you could outrun your grenades fairly easily.
Okay, I can see that. So let's go back to Dark Souls.
Oh, of course,
because everybody loves talking about Dark Souls.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my favorite things that I've been looking at in Dark Souls is all of the different themed runs that you can make through that game. Because like there's all sorts of equipment in that game, and one of the really interesting things about Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and all those kinds of games, of which there are just the two, so I don't know why I'm saying all those kinds of games.
Neither do I.
But the thing about both of those games is that like there's no straight upgrades in weapons in that game. Like it's not like you're getting like the wooden sword and the bronze sword.
Well,
and
there
the
are
silver
different
sword.
kinds of swords. Like the Zweihander is different than the broadsword, but they have their own benefits and drawbacks. And there's not like. And you can upgrade an individual weapon, like the broadsword to broadsword +2, broadsword +3.
Yes.
But it's not like the Zweihander is inherently better than the broadsword, or that the, say for example, the whip is worse than the, main gauche or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to a play style of like, do you like how this weapon handles? Like the first time you get any weapon in the game, even if it's like in the very first level, is designed in a way that you should be able to use that weapon all the way up to the end of the game and be just fine so long as you sufficiently upgrade it. So what makes it interesting is like all the different weapons that are all sorts of different kinds of like with different kinds of move sets, and it changes the way that you play the game a great deal.
Oh yeah.
So in a way it's very efficient in that design because
okay, stop mooning over it and get to the point.
Well, no, hang on, because this is important. This is one of the really brilliant parts about the design, and the way that it kind of bucks the upgrade trend in a way that makes a lot of sense for the way that the design works. Is like if you're going to make a game that is ultimately very puzzle-like figure out how to do this like level that will be exactly the same every time you play it.
Right. Having
different weapons forces you to seek out different solutions than the first time that you played it. So it lends itself to replayability very, very well. So some of the fun themed runs that I've seen though are like the boxer, who goes around with some kind of appropriate pants, like a weird onion helmet, no shirt, and 2 fist weapons. One of which happens to, with its strong attack, do the biggest shoryuken that you've ever seen. You didn't even see like the back half of that video where like some poor hollow gets just launched across the whole playing field, just like off of a cliff from the shoryuken. It was amazing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Another one that I can't wait to try out is the Spartan run.
Oh dear.
where you play with nothing. You play with like
Loincloth,
basically
shield, and spear?
loincloth, a giant's helmet, a circular shield, and a winged spear, and that's all you get.
Oh, dear.
It is awesome.
Ah.
Another really funny themed run that I'm looking to try out is the Simon Belmont run, where you go around with a whip and no shield and throwing knives.
Oh, man.
And just, like, I can't imagine, like, how to play that game without a shield.
Well, I guess at this point, the rules change we're looking at here is that, like, you're limiting yourself to a specific set of equipment for the theme rather than any sort of like benefit or
it's all totally doable, like not even by accident, because like technically you could beat the last boss with like the starting equipment at level 1. You could just do it. It's just a question of it, like it's not that forgiving at that point,
right?
But it's possible.
Yeah, he hits you once, you're completely and utterly dead, and it's going to take you hours to chip away at his health with the little crappy weapon.
Perhaps,
right?
Maybe you can upgrade your weapon.
I'm interested to see if you could do the whole thing completely unarmed and armored.
That would be interesting because, like, it would depend on if you're able to parry without a shield. I think you actually need either a shield or like a specific weapon, like a parrying dagger, to parry. Because parrying is very important to the last boss fight. Spoilers.
Right.
Anyway, so that's this week's Inquisition.
When did a simple rule alteration completely change a game?
Send responses to the email at gamingdisquisition@gmail.com.
You can reach us on Facebook, facebook.com/thegamingdisquisition, or on the Google+.
Get a hold of us on Twitter at DisquisitorSam.
At DisquisitorMark.
On Twitter.
Tweet.
And keep those responses coming right in.
Yep.
So that's all we're going to do for the mailbag for now, and we're going to move on to some other topics.
You mean topics that are important to everyone?
Pretty much. It's time for the news. And this week in the news, our first article comes to us from none other than our listener, Dan. Mm-hmm. And he talks about a new venture that Valve is getting involved in.
Oh, Valve, what have you done?
What have you done? What has science done?
Apparently, Valve has decided that Steam trading cards are going to be a thing that they're doing. It's in beta right now. And before people start decrying Valve as being insane... Well, never mind. They are
insane.
But basically, there are these virtual trading cards that you earn through playing certain games, and you then use them to craft badges. Like you collect a set of cards, and then you put them together to form a badge, and then you use that badge to level up because you now have a Steam level.
Yeah,
And then you get rewards for different badges, like you can get profile backgrounds or coupons for DLC or
emoticons for using anywhere where there's a Steam thing.
Yeah, and then of course there's people who have like their profiles that'll be like, this is a really cool profile that someone has done, or you can show off very things that you've done with your account and all this other weirdness. And
that doesn't matter at all.
Not at all. It's just it is now, Steam is now its own game. It is now not just a place for you to go to get other games. Steam is now a game in and of itself. I guess it already has been for some of the other collectible things and whatever.
You're not kidding.
But realistically, what Valve has done here is that they have given you yet another reason to buy these games and play these games as much as humanly possible.
So let's talk a little bit about where these kind of come from. And actually, when it comes to this game, I feel as though like they could have potentially done more of this, because like there's all these cards, but like all you do is just collect the cards. And what if you could do other things with these cards? What if you could play like a game with these cards, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, I could see this being its own game in and of itself, where they all have their own point values, and you're going to, have the players playing, Steam Triad or what have you.
Yeah, and like we could totally like have people wager cards, and
there could be ante, because one of the cool things about this, I actually kind of thought this was a neat idea on their part, is that if there is, for example, a set of 8 cards that could be got from this one game, well, you only have the option of getting 4 of them. And you have to trade.
It's not even an option.
People.
Like, it's just like that is the most number of cards that you will ever get from that game. Once you've gotten 4, it will not dispense any more cards to you.
Exactly, but another person might have gotten a different 4 cards. And, maybe you have to trade one of the cards that you get for someone that they got, because that's the only way you're going to get the rest of those cards.
So basically what you're going to start doing is playing a card economy because, like, you know, theoretically amongst all the, you know, millions and millions of players of Steam, that, like, you would think that they would eventually have some kind of equilibrium of like what cards were distributed where, but that's not guaranteed to be the case. No, we could potentially.
I foresee someone down the line, there being like a news report of a man who has ruined himself financially playing the secondhand Steam trading card market.
Well, like, it's there might be some trends that emerge from this, where, like, you know, like the, you know, card 8 of the set, for whatever reason, like just due to just a freak chance, like, you know, only like maybe like 4%, as opposed to like what would that be out of 8? Like 16%, I think. Maybe is
one
like
of 8. Yeah.
8 out of 100 is what I'm going for, and like I feel bad for not being able to bet.
Is 8%.
No, that's not what I mean. Like eight cards, and then like the percentage that one card would make. So basically 1/8, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know math. Hold on.
Right. I believe it's 0.16.
Yeah. No, 1.12.
0.12. Oh, okay, right. Yeah.
5.
You know, whatever. Anyway.
So about 12.5%. But like
heresy.
But maybe a card might emerge as like only 4%.
Yeah.
You know, like, and just like and just be arbitrarily more valuable, and especially if there's one badge that people really, 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 really want.
Oh, and they're foils.
Oh, God.
After you've reached Steam level 10, there's a chance that one of your cards that you'll get will just be foil. There's nothing it does for you other than be foil, which can then be put together with other foil cards to form a foil badge, which does nothing other than be foil.
But, you know, it does confer some other weird kind of, like, inherent value, just like the vintage equipment in Team Fortress 2.
Exactly. So what we're going to see now is people playing Steam. Just Steam. You know, people now, I mean, a part of this, I guess, is, you know, there are benefits to this, like people playing games they wouldn't have otherwise played to try to get these things, and maybe finding games they enjoy and, you know, going all that sort of thing. But I have to applaud Valve for just completely coming out of nowhere and coming up with this little plan of theirs, because it's ingenious.
It's ingenious, and it's going to make them a lot of money whether we participate or not.
Yeah, maybe they'll coin in on the secondhand market. You never know. But it kind of feels like we've been decked.
Oh, are you serious? Are we really going to draw from that?
Yeah, Valve's a real card. You know, people really like it when we're trading blows.
I think it's time to fold that one up.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Anyway, so our next article is apparently it's Warren Spector month this month. So because we're featuring another little opinion piece written by none other than the Warren Spector about why Metacritic should be irrelevant.
You know, now that I just think about it, he's a Borrow White, like from Lord of the Rings. He's a Warren Spector.
Wow.
Yeah, I like that. Anyway.
That's awful.
Yeah, so he basically talks about the fact that, you know, Metacritic is pretty much just worthless. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant, well, very irrelevant, and he goes into a very, very long post about why it is so.
Well, okay, so let's be clear here. So Metacritic is definitely a very important part of the games industry. Insofar as, like, we have decided that we're going to, like, measure all games objectively versus each other, like, you know, according to criteria that nobody really knows about.
Yeah, the problem with it is that it has become important, but it shouldn't be. It should be nowhere near as important as it is, and people basing all of these decisions off of Metacritic are wrong to do so. And I kind of have to admit, I agree with Warren Spector in the fact that it has gone way out of proportion with what it actually should have been, and it's just been badly handled from the get-go.
Well, I don't think that there's really even a point to it at all. Like, there's just, like, one of the points that he makes is that, like, if you, like, for example, in movies, like, if you're looking for somebody to tell you what's what with movies, you can, as long as someone has a consistent viewpoint, even if you disagree with their viewpoint, we can we can still draw use from their viewpoint, because like if we happen to disagree with them all the time, if he doesn't like this one thing, that means I might like it.
But the thing is, they're consistent, and that's the really important thing. Is if you have someone who you can go to who will give you a consistent read of what they like and what they don't, then you can base on whether you'd like it off of the fact whether they did or not, or at least you look at their reaction. If you know someone who hates action movies and they say, "Oh, did you like it?" "Oh, no, I hated it." "Oh, well, then I might like it because I like action movies."
Yeah.
Or what have you.
See, Metacritic is the opposite of that, because Metacritic is an aggregate of all reviews, regardless of criteria, regardless of outlook.
This is like taking all of your friends. This is like trying to decide on pizza toppings. That's what this is. This is like everyone get together and decide on what the best pizza topping is. And it's like, well, he can't eat pork, but his review's in there anyway. And okay, this person can't eat, gluten. Well, their review's in there anyway. And it kind
of devalues the pork and the...
it's like, well, this person really loved the pork, and maybe you really want the pork, but this other person's like, no, I can't eat pork. Good lord. It seems ridiculous, but that's basically what Metacritic is. This person's like, oh man, this game sucked because it had this and this and this and this. And the other person's like, oh man, this game was awesome because of the exact same things that other person hated. But both of them are equally valid, and they're both going to be lumped into this one thing. Now, don't get me wrong. Their opinions are still valid, but when
I disagree, actually, because I think that by and large critics have no idea what of games that they're actually trying to rate. That's why
some of them don't. Yes.
That's how we get these stupid reviews. They're like, oh, the music was a 7 and the gameplay is an 8.5.
Yeah, but the thing is, I would say they're still relevant enough that if one person follows that person's reviews and knows how they review them and then can trust that review, as long as the consistency is there, as long as they're not jumping back and forth like, oh, well, this one was great, but the other one that is the exact same thing was awesome, as long as they're consistent, though, you can use their reviews. And even if they're just badly reviewed. But I mean, again, I guess at that point, if they're just really bad at reviewing, that means they're inconsistent.
See, I would say that rating a game based off of an aggregate of its music and its gameplay and its sound and its non-bugginess, I think that totally misses the point of what a game or any art style should be. Because most art is made, but most effective art is made in the service of one grand principle where everything tries to serve that principle. Yeah. If you try to dissect it like that, you might ruin it.
I suppose. I guess in the defense of giving more information to the consumer, like when you read the Game Informer reviews for better or for worse, and they say, well, gameplay was this, and the replayability was this, and the music was this, at least I can look at that and say, you know what, I don't care that they gave it a low music score, but everything else seemed to be pretty high. I'll probably play it even though the music dragged the score down or something like that. But
wouldn't it be good if the music served the purpose of the game?
And the person might still, but that person who reviewed it didn't think so, or whatever.
Well, or he wasn't even looking at that as a criteria. It's just how much he enjoyed the music just by itself as a separate component. Yeah, which seems to be of how they generally do that.
I'd say the one thing is that looking at some of those reviews and reading the why of why they say it. If they give the music a 7, they'll say, well, it was good because of this, and it was really repetitive in these situations. And it's okay, well, repetitive music, okay, that can drag the score down if it's not dynamically changing with it or whatever. But again, it all really depends on what game it is, because if you're playing a fighting game, get ready for repetitive music.
And maybe that serves the fighting game, and maybe the music, while perhaps not good quality on its own, maybe does a really, really good job of serving its place in the game.
Yeah, and I think so. I'll give the reviewers some credit, because I've gone off reviews before, and there were a few reviewers back in the day that I would follow because what they liked really meshed with what I did. And even when it came down to they said, okay, they gave it low score on this, and I would play it and go, okay, I can see why they said that. Or, I find out after the fact that, oh man, I really like this game except for this one thing, and look back at the review and go, oh yeah, they totally called that.
I just don't think that the numerical or the number of stars or the letter grade, I just don't think that stuff is really appropriate. What I respect, if not always agree with, is Yahtzee's review, where he refuses to give the game an overall score. He just tells you things about it.
Yeah, and lets you decide on your own. But I guess at that point it's the magazines and the other websites, they give you a glance. They say, this is what we thought, and that's it. And then our bottom line is blah. But this kind of moves us directly into a review that we found on Destructoid by a person by the name of Loading Screen.
Chris Carter.
Chris Carter, yes. Associate editor at Destructoid, whatever that means.
So yeah, anyway, like here he's reviewing Dust 514, and like his review basically consists of, oh man, there's microtransactions in this game that like they're not pay to win, but they feel like they're pay to win, and I don't know if I like that.
To give the guy a little bit of credit, he does go on to talk about the fact, like, he talks about, what Dust 514 is, what it's trying to accomplish, how it's doing.
I don't think he does any of that.
Well, he does. He goes on to talk about the link between Dust and Eve.
He says that it's a link between Dust and Eve, and everybody knows that. But, like, what you have to look at is, like, what the rules of the game and the dynamics of play are trying to accomplish, as opposed to, like, what the game is being billed as.
Yeah.
Like that, because he says that like he doesn't like the fact that it's pay to win. He claims to have been an Eve player back in the day, so that surprises me that he doesn't draw the connection that Eve is also pay to win. Yeah. Buy Plex, convert to ISK, buy ships. This is exactly the same thing.
Yeah, the things that he calls Dust on are kind of stupid, I have to admit, because he talks about like, oh, you have to grind for so long to get a thing that's a single-use item that could be destroyed within a matter of minutes, and it's like, well, yes, that's exactly it. You have to do these things.
Maybe it's good that the most powerful equipment and the best vehicles in the game are only brought to the field if it's really important, and if you have, if it just not all the time. Maybe they're supposed to be good and only used infrequently.
Exactly. I mean, it would kind of devalue it if you could always summon in an airstrike of a very powerful kind. And maybe the people who are actively grinding and getting the stuff to be able to do them frequently deserve to get the wins for using the thing that they that they just grinded a whole bunch for.
Well, I wouldn't say it's so much of a deserve thing.
Not deserve, but
I think what it would be is like they have managed their resources well.
Yeah, and that's fine. And honestly, talking about how the Aurum can be used to get better, to blueprints for better stuff that you can still buy with ISK, but it takes so long to get. Well, again, because it's worth it when you do. If that thing could be used to turn the tide of a battle by strategically using it when you should, then that's kind of the point of it, and that's not a downside. That's part of the meta of the game is knowing when to use these things when they're going to be the best used, and
This is part of the problem of reviewers is that most reviewers approach games like that. We read another review of this exact same game actually that I'm kind of getting the same sense from the first one, where basically like let's rate how much this game is like Halo or like Call of Duty. And just like people seem to be like they hold up these games that they really like as like the pinnacle of the genre, and anybody doing anything different or making me feel bad somehow, obviously that makes it a worse game as opposed to like a different rule set with a different kind of set of motivations.
Yeah, this guy gave it a 6 out of 10, which is basically a quote all right unquote score. But I mean, we're not defending Dust to say, oh no, how dare you give it a bad score? But at least come up with a better reason for giving it a bad score than you think it might be pay to win, but don't have evidence that it is, or at least think that it is, but then say, well, it's just kind of
you can appreciate a well designed system while at the same time not liking it. And I think that's important for game critics to understand is that, like maybe they'll never play something like Dark Souls, but like on some level understanding everything that goes into its craft, like I think that a savvy game critic should be able to appreciate things outside of his own preference.
Yeah, and I do have to admit, he did make a few things. He said like when he was playing, he had lag and there were some loading issues and some frame rate issues and things like that, which are perfectly reasonable complaints. So I mean, I can at least give him that credit because those are things.
But those are easy. Those are obvious.
Yeah, but I think that saying that overall the game, if you're reviewing the game, saying well it had lag issues and had frame rate issues, that's a legitimate thing to complain about. But it seems that he kind of attached himself on a very kind of floppy base and just didn't really drive it home.
Yeah. At any rate, so we need to move along then. And let's see, we have an article from GamesIndustry.biz by Rachel Weber. the Ouya has been beaten by phones in benchmark tests.
It only ranks at 73 in a list of Android devices out of, I believe it's 258 Android devices.
So evidently, its hardware is not up to snuff as far as like even just your cell phones go. But let's keep this in perspective, guys.
Do you know how much your iPhone 5 costs? You know how much that costs?
Oh, I only paid $99.99 for it.
Yeah, but you know how much it actually costs as a piece of equipment?
Like $800, $900.
Yeah, exactly. If you were buying that piece of equipment straight up, you'd be paying about $800 or $900 for it. The Ouya is $99 straight up for buying the machine. Of course, it's not going to be as powerful as some of the best mobile technology on the market that you're getting for cheap, mind you, because you're paying for, a contract or whatever. The point being is, yes, it's going to get beaten, but that's not the point.
It isn't, and processing power in your video game consoles has nothing to do with game design. Like all of you guys, when you bought your Atari in the late 70s, early 80s, or whenever you happened to get on board, you bought that Atari and you loved it.
Yeah, even though the Atari didn't even necessarily have the best, graphics quality of any computer out there, obviously, but it was cheap enough to put in your living room. And that's really what we're looking at the Ouya here. You're putting it in your living room and you're playing games on something you wouldn't use your phone for. And of course, there are phones that can do that. But point being, you're still using this for a different thing. It's not going to be as powerful as a $900 piece of machinery, in the same way that your PS3 isn't necessarily going to be as ridiculously powerful as a $4,000 computer.
Let's wait for the games to speak for themselves rather than comment on how, oh man, this thing is so weak.
I guess it did kind of come off as a little bit of an almost accusatory fashion on the review, saying, well, here's what happened, and here's what they're saying about it. I mean...
And here's the Gaming Disquisition telling you why that doesn't matter.
Exactly.
All right, so next on our list is a blog by how does this even go? Ramin Shokrizad? That's about... we'll call Mr. Ramen, because I like that. And
Mr. Ramen, indeed.
And maybe it might even be a girl. I have no idea. Anyway, this person writes an article called "Systems of Control in Free-to-Play." So this was an interesting little article that talks about a way to quantify how your audience will react to the methods that you present your free-to-play model to them, and he basically quantifies this in two broad criteria, which is the visibility of control and the tolerance to control. And the visibility of control is basically how
well did they hide it?
How well did they hide like the fact that you eventually do have to pay in order to get through like certain parts of this game.
And the tolerance is how much can the person how much are they going to pay and how much are they going to do before they start railing against it and saying, you know what, no, this is ridiculous, I'm not doing this anymore. And he goes on, he does a few equations, and they're talking about the one thing he goes into, which I found really interesting, he says, treating consumers like a disease. Basically we're talking about the fact that, if you were to treat a consumer like a disease, you're basically looking at when we're using antibiotics versus diseases.
It's an interesting comparison that he makes, where he the way that we use like antibiotics versus diseases, and trying to cure a large problem, but as you keep on using the antibodies, the virus mutates and gets more resistant to
fluctuates like a market almost.
Yes, in fact.
The point is that whether he's talking about it, and if it's treated like this, and if it's viewed like this, we can kind of see that as people are using this free to play model, and as the tolerance to control is getting lower and lower and lower, which it started pretty low in the West, to start with, and the fact that we're not as likely as say the Asia Pacific countries are very very likely to be buying a lot of stuff in their games. We're not as much of that, and it's getting lower and lower every year. And it's because the people are the visibility of control just isn't high enough for us to stop and say, you know what? How many times have you cringed when you heard the word free to play? I mean, I know you have.
But I feel like more and more people are starting to do that. I mean,
they really are. We've been hearing a lot of people in the gaming news talk more and more about free to play this and bad free to play that, and the few shining gems where it's done well. But the fact is
are there?
Well, think dust.
Yeah, what about it? Oh,
Yeah.
all right, maybe
Again,
not.
but-
I still do have misgivings about like the free to play ness of it. Like
Yeah.
I don't like he's not like the reviewer isn't 100% wrong there. But,
True.
you know,
But the idea though is that if our tolerance to control keeps getting lower and lower and lower, eventually it's just going to die out.
yeah, it would be interesting to find out if there would be some sort of a time when like the free to play model just becomes non-viable because you have a whole bunch of people who basically have just like become so callous to it that like eventually this bubble pops and now no one does free to play anymore.
Exactly, and this is something that as the article is pretty informative. I mean, we do highly suggest going into it. And I think we've talked about that when we did our free to play. Like we did one of our main topics on free to play. It's like someone who has spent even a single dollar on the game is way more likely to spend way more on it than someone who refuses to spend any money at all.
Well, once you've made that for initial investment, now you feel invested in like protecting that investment and like spending more on it. Like, well, I already bought this, so like I may as well just like make this my free to play game.
Yeah, and just to kind of drive this point home, we've talked about Gung Ho Entertainment before. The people who made that wonderfully addictive game Puzzle and Dragons.
Yes, that game. Remember,
they've
so
kind
the
of
last
gone
time
crazy.
the last time that we talked about that, I believe they were making somewhere on the order of like $2.5 million a day, something about that. No, a day. That was the original.
Oh, right, you're right. 2.5 million a day they were
Yes.
making on this thing, effectively. Well, guess what, guys? They've upped the ante. They're now up to about 3.75 million a day, which
A day.
yeah, which by the way equaled out to $113 million just in April.
So this is obvious. We talked about this being primarily a thing in the Asian markets.
As a matter of fact, 10% of Japan's population is playing this game.
Amazing.
13 million players.
Amazing, really. And so, like, this is so. Maybe this flies in the face of like free to play going away, but at the same time, like this game does have many layers. It does have like that visibility of control level is very high. Because it just kind of addicts you to that to a certain level of progress, and then and then it just makes attaining that level of progress harder and harder and harder, and you have to spend more and more and more money. I've been thinking about this, and maybe it's not so much that they have more players now to make 3.75 million a day. Maybe now just everybody is so high in level that everybody has to pay all the time.
I'm actually curious to see how much each person would have to spend a day to actually get this. I mean, we're talking 3.75 million a day by their 13 million players. So,
Okay.
I mean, what are we talking here? Let's do this math live.
3.75 million a day for what 13 million
For
players?
13 million players.
Okay, so so assuming that there are no millions, or no, dropping like the million,
Yeah.
basically, where we are at 0.288. So basically, what does that come out to? Like basically, I think that means 29 cents, basically.
29 cents per player per day. Is
Yes.
that right? That seems a little off.
Well, because bear in mind that like not everybody is paying. you know.
True. So I guess we could do 3.75 million divided by 13, which will give you the same exact thing, I guess.
That's exactly what I just did.
Yeah, so I guess, we're talking 28 cents a person per day.
Now, let's assume that like only
The
like
minimum transaction's like $1.
let's assume that only 10% of the people are paying though, which is a pretty significant chunk. So 3.75 divided by 1.3 is like almost $3, like 2.88.
And you know what? People pay more for that for their daily coffee.
It's true,
think
they do.
about that. You go to work, you buy your coffee, you buy whatever, and especially around here, you're paying way more than $3 a cup. So I mean, if you were to spend that on this game, you would be helping make Puzzle and Dragons to be even bigger than it is now.
So yes, free to play, still a thing.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, just to drive this home again, they actually beat out Nintendo's market cap.
Yeah.
So where they went out to about 15.1 billion, whereas 15 billion was where Nintendo was, and they're just under Activision Blizzard at 16.7 billion.
Bear in mind, Gung Ho Entertainment, their Puzzle and Dragons is not their only product, but it is their big one.
The vast majority of what they're actually doing.
So at any rate, we need to move. We are running out of time, so we need to move right along to our last article of the day, and this one is. So remember last week when we were talking about how the Siffy channel.
They renewed Defiance for another season, so we said, you know what, guys at Tryon, you get to keep your jobs a little bit longer. Because
you guys are safe now because now you can continue to produce for the Defiance MMO. Evidently, we spoke too soon.
Apparently.
Because we just got a whole bunch of layoffs at Tryon Entertainment.
Yeah, although not only previously did they release around 40 of their workers from the Rift development team, but apparently they've just gone through a round of layoffs on their Defiance team as well.
So we're going to read the statement from Tryon Games. To best position Tryon in a rapidly changing industry, we've reorganized our teams and are expanding our free-to-play offering. With Defiance, we delivered a great game with more than 1 million gamers registered to play and continue to enjoy. As we progress from launch to ongoing development of the game, we are adjusting our staffing levels to deliver new content and improved features. Rift and our other titles in development were unaffected by these changes. We are very much looking forward to the free-to-play release of Rift and are excited by the other new titles currently in development.
Oh yeah, that certainly happened.
What an industry where now we made the game and we need significantly less people to continue to churn out content. So bye guys.
Yeah, and there was an update. Apparently Scott Hartzman, who was an executive producer on Rift prior to his departure in January, he commented on his public status on Facebook, quote, "Same as last time. If I can help at all with intros or anything, please find me. This model of game making is so fundamentally broken." End quote.
But it's what we got. It's what we make art with. Isn't that a comforting thought?
Dear, yes.
And that's all we have for this week in the news. So we are going to go to the break and let you listen to some tunes. When we come back, we are going to go into a topic that is near and dear to all of our hearts that we all so dearly love.
Yeah, video games is art.
Art?
Yep, we're going back there and we're gonna dig deeper into this thing and we're gonna try to find a little bit more, specific information about what makes it tick.
And perhaps just art in general. Maybe we have a lot to learn from other artistic mediums. But all that and more.
Did you just say that? Video games have something to learn from other artistic mediums?
Nobody seems to have figured that out yet, though. And all that and more coming your way after the break, so sit right there. This is the Gaming Disquisition with Sam and Mark, and by our own volition, this edition of our Disposition Inquisition will be back after this brief intermission. The Gaming Disquisition with Sam and Mark continues. I'm Sam.
I am Mark.
This is the Disquisition.
And the Disquisition is here to stay.
That we are. Main topic is coming your way in just a moment. Music from the break this week. Our first track is called Blanka in Brasil. This is a track from Alan Garcia, also known as AlanGee on OC Remix.
It's .org.
This is a track that comes from Street Fighter II, and the liner notes from Alan Garcia go like this. It's been 20 years since the release of Street Fighter II: The World Warrior, and to this day I have always sang and shared my passion about the music composed by the three composers involved in the game. The one I have always been most passionate about is Blanka's theme. I always dreamed of hearing this song arranged in a very African or South American way. This tune was written with the time signature in 4/4, but syncopates to a 3/4 time by use of triplets.
I have no idea what that means.
I knew doing this would really bring out the beautiful melody I love and also make room for some solid percussion as the foundation of the tune. Taking the melody are nylon guitar and piano. A synth voice is used to support the acoustic instruments. Traditionally, the foundation of this song is the bass line, but since the bass line really was written as a support to the unique chord to the song by holding a pedal to the root note, I gave it an African instrument known as the kora and had it be an arpeggiation of sorts. Thank you for giving all VGM composers and arrangers and remixers the opportunity to spread their passion and an opportunity to be heard. That from AlanGee. And he's absolutely. I think he kind of breaks it down exactly how I would have, because so he mentions the 4/4 and 3/4, right?
Yes.
So if you remember how the original song goes, it's kind of like this just straight pulse that it just kind of you follow it,
right?
But in this one there was like this dun 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 kind of feel for it.
Yeah.
So that's the triplets is what it's talking about.
Okay, gotcha.
But he overlays those triplets on top of the traditional 4/4 pulse. And he uses the triplets to basically construct that drum beat basically as it were.
Okay, I am now I've been informed.
It's really neat how he does that, and it's a very cultural piece. I feel like it's,
definitely it felt appropriate for what it is.
Absolutely, it did. So if you'd like to check out more by AlanGee, you can check him out at facebook.com/AlanGee15. That's AlanGee15. Mm-hmm. Our next track is called Beyond the Glass. This is from Sam Dillard, who we have featured in the past before. This track comes from Super Metroid, and Sam Dillard had this to write. This is the Meridia remix I did for the Harmony of a Hunter 101% run. Something pretty dark and mysterious and ominous, mostly an orchestral piece and some electronic accents and textures. For the best experience with this song, I also created a 3D animated music video, which can be found here, and I will be appending that to the show notes, so make sure that you check that out towards the end of the show notes where the music in this episode is usually found.
Oh, definitely. And I actually, being a fairly huge fan of Super Metroid, I just really loved this remix, and just the name Beyond the Glass, just brings me back to when you first entered Meridia by power bombing the tube, between Brinstar and Norfair. You
should check out that video because he kind of deals a little bit with that.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I just thought that he does what Sam Dillard does what he does best, and what he does best is that really orchestral kind of feel. But he brings a lot of modern sensibilities, kind of like the Hollywood style, where he has some electronic bass sounds alongside of all of the symphonies and whatnot. And that symphony is not the right word.
No, I know
the symphonic sound.
Yeah.
So it works out really well, and just consider that he is making all of this on just his own computer, without really enlisting the help of an actual orchestra. So considering that, perhaps the greatest of ears might be able to perceive a difference, but it's just about there where you almost kind of don't need the symphony. But and I can I've heard some people kind of complain about that, where will symphonies be without when we don't need to? But on some level, there. Actual human beings in an orchestra can provide something that even the best reproductions can't do. I just like the idea of just anybody being able to compose their own symphonic tracks and
definitely. And when you get things like this, you can't really complain.
Yeah, it kind of opens up the medium, and I'm appreciative of that because it gives us stuff like this. And if you'd like to check out more of stuff like this from Sam Dillard, you can check him out at samostudios.com, SAMO Studios.com.
And as always, you can check out the show notes and the Facebook for more websites for these artists and links to the higher quality versions of their tracks.
So, moving right along.
Dug it done.
So we are going to go to the main topic of the show, and our main topic, as we have previously mentioned, has to do with art and video games. But actually, what I wanted to do for this particular topic is just talk about what art is in general and what is craft in general. This is something that I feel as though, like since forever ago, we've always wanted video games to be like this art form, and it is one, and like that's great and everything. But I think what a lot of people kind of miss is like what the rest of what the trappings of being art means. Like what everything that comes with being an art. I feel like there are some people that kind of are not really prepared for that, or at least not thinking about it. And I've really been making it a point to study art in general in recent times, to try to put myself give myself a little bit of perspective as far as how other forms of art have grown. You have to understand that that video games as an art is really only like 30 to 40 years old, which is very, very short time. And we've been really spending a lot of time just kind of exploding the medium and just like, let's do this, let's do that, let's try all these weird things. And at this point, I feel like we're kind of stagnating, because now we're kind of just falling back into the same old, like, oh, here's our platformer, and here is our modern shooter, and here is all these different, all these different, all these genres that, like, on some level, you can kind of boil them down to like the same 10 to 12 games over and over again. I mean, even Dark Souls. Like, as much as I love Dark Souls, like, Dark Souls is the natural evolution of Castlevania, and there's not a whole lot different from both of those games. At least in terms of like the way that you approach it and the way that you do things. I happen to like Castlevania, so I'm going to like Dark Souls as well. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking that we're doing something super, super new. We're doing refinements, and that's great. Mm-hmm. So I guess where I want to start is the experience that I talked about this in the beginning of the show. The experience that I had with Joy this last week. Now, Joy is a master of arts in terms of creative writing, and also has a couple other like minors or other degrees that I'm blanking on.
Right.
But all kind of like art related, and it was really neat going to and doing things with her this last week, and kind of learning about like her expertise was very helpful in formulating some of my opinions about art as well. Particularly when we went to the Seattle Art Museum. Have you been there?
Seattle Art Museum?
Yeah.
It's been a while, but I have been there.
Okay. And just so, I mean, what's the kind of stuff that you take away from like the Seattle Art Museum?
To be honest, I'm probably a very bad person to talk about art in general, because I've always had a very pragmatic view. I like what I like, and I'm usually not quite the person that would go very deep into why it's something I like. I like it on the surface for this reason. And when it comes to like most modern art and things like that, which again, Seattle Art Museum has quite a lot of expressionist modern arts and things like that, and for the most part is completely lost on me. When it comes to like shape of form and this kind of thing, I've always kind of viewed that sort of thing to be outside my purview. Although I know for a fact it's not. I mean, the whole point behind art is to be really is viewed and interpreted and all this stuff. But I've always been of the mind of like, well, I have no idea what goes into this, and and I was always of the mindset that who am I to put forth what I think about this thing when I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
Well, okay, so like that's interesting that you would put it that way, because like what I have a very strong feeling about like that art is primarily like, well, okay, so first let's throw down a generic definition of art, and let's get that out of the way. Art is the creation of human creativity. Like, or product of human creativity.
Sure.
Like, that's all we really need. And then, like, the rest of it is just kind of a meta definition for art.
Yeah, at that point, it just becomes, everyone splits hairs and tries to come up with something that applies to whatever it is they're trying to say is art.
Yeah. But, like, here's the thing, is, like, one of the things I learned a lot about while I was there was I found, like, that, there's... some of the more modern art was perhaps a little difficult, although there were some things that kind of appealed to me. Like, there was one that, like, there was basically just, like, I think it was 4 lines that like some of them were coming in like diagonally from one end, and then there's another 4 were coming in diagonally from the other, and kind of like almost like they would meet, except they were about to miss, like if they were traveling forward towards each other.
Yeah.
But then that also gave the impression that they were about to like spiral with each other, you know. And like there was some interesting techniques that were used to like make them look rather ethereal. It was a very, very large piece. Like it was like I think it was probably like maybe 20 or 30 feet high.
Right.
But like just you were supposed to look at it from, from across the room, and like one of the things that art does, I feel, is that art is a primary form of communication, where like you have this idea and you want to communicate this idea to someone else in a way that like is not just me telling you it, like, verbally, although that can also be an art, telling it verbally.
Right.
But like, finding ways to express things that like maybe verbal communication is not ideal.
Right.
Like and one of the things I found as I went into some of the other exhibits were like some of the ancient art, like stuff that's on like Grecian urns or like on like like these like Aborigine shields or something like that. And like I realized that like art primarily communicates to to an audience.
Yeah, usually a very specific intended audience rather than just to everybody.
Like it's not. I'm not really meant to personally take anything away from the design on an Aboriginal shield,
right?
But like but the people who were there at the time did, and having context can provide a lot for art. And sometimes art is like dialogues between artists, like where one person does something. I think one of the more famous examples, I'm going to go into a little art history here. And I'm not going to get this totally right because it's been a while, but
sure.
The Fountain by R. Mutt. Are you familiar?
No.
Okay, so if you just look at The Fountain by R. Mutt, it is an upended urinal. And that is all that it is. It's just sitting there, and it looks vaguely like it could be kind of like fountain-like.
Okay, yeah.
But you kind of can't get around the fact that it's a urinal.
Right.
So how is this art? Well, I mean, it is art by the literal definition of a product of human creativity, but why is it important? And you kind of need the context to understand why that was important. And the context is that it was not made by R. Mutt at all. It was actually made by the name of a guy by the name of Samuel Duchamp, who at the time was a little upset with art academia, and how he thought that they were being really genuinely restrictive of like what kinds of art that you could that they would accept,
right?
And like what was appropriate art, and so he did that to challenge them. And then when they rejected the piece for an exhibit, he wrote them a scathing letter, and I believe he made it a fairly public affair of just like tearing them a new one for rejecting the piece of art as he knew they would. But it was an art that made a lot of sense and was very important in context, because it kind of paved the way for there's a style of art called ready-mades, where you just like you don't do anything, you just find something, you do something weird with it, and then they call it art.
Okay, yeah, that's the stuff I just cannot wrap my head around. I mean, it's like the idea of it's not like I found a bunch of hubcaps and then created a mural. It's that I found a single hubcap, put it on a stand, and said, it's the poetry of motion.
Well, but see, if that doesn't speak to you though, like if the hubcap on the pedestal that's communicating motion doesn't communicate motion, then that is actually the art's fault. There's a way that you could potentially arrange that particular hubcap, and like maybe with a little bit of context, you might be able to get that motion. Maybe you attach it to like some sort of machinery that has it constantly spinning or something.
Okay, yeah, but what about an upside down urinal?
Well, okay, so the urinal was specifically chosen, as I recall, to just be like as repulsive as possible. Like he wanted to make sure that they were going to reject it. Okay,
but it is now there under a different guy's name.
Yeah, and so what he basically like it wasn't art meant to be like for the ages, but it became important as a historical piece.
Okay, so at that point it's more like this is like a not a footnote, but like this is a stone on the road of art, and this is what it means as long as you understand what it means.
Yes, and so one of the things that you can kind of take from art in general, and one of the things that I just kind of reflected on the whole time I was there, was just that art is while it is subjective in interpretation, like you also like you kind of hope to communicate something. Not maybe objective is maybe not the right word, but you do hope that you do have an intent. You do have something that you hope that with enough context, or hopefully with as little context as possible, that the audience can get. But that's assuming that you want that your audience is all the people ever. So what the hell does all this have to do with video games? Well, so one of the problems that I think that I have with video games is that we've been expanding as an art, and we've been like doing all sorts of weird things and like just doing different things for the sake of doing different things. But one thing that I feel is really lacking in video games as art is an art academia. And it's some sort of like really intellectual, really intelligent, very kind of formalized approach to video games as art. And, you know, what makes video games artistic? What do they do well? What do they not do so well? That leads us into one of the inspiration articles that I'm going to link to the show notes. It's basically a series of slides that are like basically could potentially be just like an essay or something. And I'm blanking on the guy's name. Help me out. Do you have it up right now? I have it up. Darius Kazemi. I'm not sure if that's
Kazemi.
Probably like that. I'm trying to pronounce it like Japanese would, but I'm not sure if that's actually. But it might not actually be like of Japanese origins.
Yeah,
who knows?
Entitled F video games.
Video games.
A little bit more vulgar, but family.
Right. Stuff. But like the thing is, like
oh, by the way, not safe for work if people are. I mean, there's no pictures really that are going to be. But it is very filled with very blunt wording.
So basically, the whole point of what Darius is getting at is, okay, video games are art, and that's great. And, like, you can communicate an idea through video games, and that's great. But, like, if you're trying to communicate an idea, and a video game is not doing it for the sake of making it a video game is not a good reason. Like, one of the things that we are, like, video games kind of have a little bit of a rock star status right now, especially among aficionados. We just love our video games almost more than anything. And unfortunately, it leads to a unhealthy fixation on video games as an expressive medium, and we tend to use video games inappropriately. Where we might try to tell a linear story, but in a way that like your interactivity can mess with it a little bit, and like. But then the game doesn't care about your interactivity. And, like, if your video game is, like, we have this tendency to try to force the round hole in the square peg. And
we've talked about this a little bit when we've gone over things like, I know we've mentioned on the show before, it's like, would Final Fantasy VI have been a better story if it had been in a book rather than in a video game? What is it that video games hurt it with? And, when we had our big discussion of, stories in video games and things like that, this whole slideshow is very much talking about the idea of, if you want to express something, find a correct medium to do this with. Don't try to bend your medium just because you want to have the fame of being the guy who made the video game about when his cat pooped. If you want to express that your cat just used the restroom, then just say it, or put it on Twitter, or use another way of expressing it that will get the point across rather than just trying to force it into the mold of video game.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's the video game is definitely a tool that you can use to express ideas, and the video game has the. Let me actually use some good language here, because like games is such a bad word, and like we don't have any good definition for that. So like if we just call it digital entertainment, and that way we can include all sorts of things like Katawa Shoujo is kind of more of like a choose your own adventure novel, but it does have like images that help out with that. And digital entertainment would include that, regardless of your definition for game. So we have this tendency to try to use the digital entertainment to do, and digital entertainment, it has the capacity to do things that other mediums just don't. But it also doesn't do things that other things do really, really well. Like maybe you just want to write a book about something, and just reading the book from start to finish is just a better experience than trying to like find your way through like a digital representation of the book and like going through all these like wrong turns on like, all these dead ends that don't mean anything. Like it's that detracts from the point that you're trying to make with your story if your user continues to just go off the rails and try to look for things that aren't there. Things like that.
I think the only thing in this article that I found any sort of issue with was when he was claiming, like, they did say that, people have been talking about, like, video games are, quote, the most exciting medium in the world, or, they have the potential to become the preeminent art and entertainment, and saying that this implies that video games, due to some magical quality, like, say, interactivity, are imbued with more potential as a medium than, say, books. Now, I think I would go out so far to say is people who say that they have more potential, are wrong. I mean, that, like we were just saying before, anything has the potential to be as deep as we want to make it.
Yes.
Like collecting toenail clippings could probably be the most interesting thing in the world if you really went down that rabbit hole. But the idea is that I think, that interactivity is probably what draws a lot of people to using video games as an art form, because it's that interactivity that tries to drive, that not only gets them involved with the art, but can get them, involved in so many different ways. Whereas, and I guess that could be argued as well. I mean, you can get emotionally involved in a book just by reading it.
Yes.
But I mean, the interactivity is just like another like layer of interactivity or another layer of involvement that people kind of strive for.
Well, I think that on some level there is a certain appeal of fantasy simulation, and even outside of artistic expression. Like it's like people don't necessarily care that you have this underlying theme, this message that you have with your game, if it means that they get to be like fantasy man swinging a sword at dragons, because that's what they've always wanted to do. And in some ways, that could hinder your message if people get lost in the fantasy simulation and miss what you're trying to say. Well, then your art is not being effective.
Right. I mean, it's like the idea of if Skyrim was a political commentary on the situations happening in the world today, and almost everyone just sees Skyrim as the game where you get to run around and be a cat person and kill dragons, then obviously you've probably done something wrong. I mean, I don't think I know very many people who will tell me like the most interesting things about the storyline, more interestingly about what they were doing. So, not that I'm saying Skyrim was an artistic expression of a very deep point, but the fact remains is you are right in that respect. Is if it was designed as an art form, as a trying to get this point across to its intended audience, well, okay, if that's how they did it, well, then they failed. I mean, very obviously, because not very many people remember the storyline of Skyrim, or at least remember that as being the most important thing about the game.
I mean, there's certainly not what you talk to everybody else about. Like, I mean, something like Mass Effect is kind of like the story basically as it unfolds, given your different decisions. Like, there is kind of an interesting like differences of like, this character died. I didn't realize that he could die. He lived.
Exactly.
And so maybe there's some value there of like people sharing strange experiences with each other, even playing the same game.
Yeah, but he does. I do agree with a lot of the other stuff, saying that it really does make sense for you to use the medium that's important. Or at least the medium that makes more sense for what you're trying to express.
Now, I do want to talk a little bit about about underlying ideas behind art, because I'm very much in the camp of like when you have an artistic venture, what I feel that you really need to do is you need to have like a single thing that you focus the most on, the most important part of your art. And then all the rest of the parts of the art, however disparate, however like individually good that they may be, should be in service of that one thing. It's why I have such a hard time with all the video game reviewers who like compartmentalize all these bits and like don't try to talk about how they add up to some whole or like serve some greater purpose.
Right, and I know we've had this discussion several times, if not many times. The idea that anything that it does that detracts from the game shouldn't be in there. I know we've had that conversation many times where I'll say, well, it makes sense for this, or it's good in this, and or it was just a fun thing to add in. And I never really had much of a problem with that. I understand the point of if the main point of what you're trying to get across is this one thing, and this is your one target audience, then obviously those things do make sense to pare down or take out the things that don't go towards that point. But I'll still have to side on the fact that if you're making a game, and your point is not to create this amazing artistic expression or to get this one point across, is to make an entertaining game, then those things can be used very well to make the game more fun.
I'm not sure on that, though, because, like, to me, the approach that we very frequently take to doing that is basically that we throw in everything that we possibly can. We kitchen sink our game and just hope that, like, something in there is something that's going to grab your attention, and you'll just ignore the rest of this other stuff that you don't like.
I mean, not every game does that, obviously, but there are games that do, and I'll admit that freely.
I mean, the MMO genre is a very stark example of that.
Just think of World of Warcraft now. We have, battle pets and, all the other stuff that are involved. The WoW trading card games that are now digital and probably going to be incorporated into the MMO as part of the whole thing. I mean, that kind of stuff is just, the reason I have not gotten into WoW after the most recent expansion is because they've basically turned it into such a huge series of mini games that I've lost interest in what made me interested in the game to begin with. And that's the thing, is that is the epitome of a kitchen sink game to me now. And that is what I will kind of gauge all the other games off of. Did they go WoW far? Well, okay, no, they're still within that realm of playability, at least for me.
Yeah, I suppose, but like the thing, I guess what happened, I think the big reason why we do this is because video games has really taken its origins from almost its infancy, in fact. It's been primarily a commercial art for its entire existence. And when you are a commercial art, like on some level, you're not free to express the art in the way that you feel will be effective. You're kind of more beholden to like making like you basically become like the clown entertainer at a birthday party, where like you think that you have all these cool things that you could do, some really like highly intellectual like tricks that you could like do, but like if they're not going to be appreciated by like the most general like lowest common denominator, you're not really allowed to do them, because like otherwise like no one's paying attention. And if you structure your entire financial model around like around having to go and do as many birthday parties as possible, then like you're going to compromise your own work.
Yeah, exactly. And that, when we're looking at the way that you choose what you're actually going to express yourself with, and then of course the whole having the very core idea of what are you trying to express. And I will go so far as to say that, when we've talked many times about, video games as art, and saying that, pretty much every video game is art in some respect. And then we've kind of gone back on that a bit. We've really kind of delved down, and it's like, I would not go so far as to say that World of Warcraft has become a work of art.
Well, okay, so
remember, in some respect, maybe.
Remember, an art is just a product of human creativity.
So in that respect,
basically,
yes.
what we're trying to do here with this whole conversation is learn how to make effective art, as opposed to just art for art's sake.
Yeah, and I think just we can
or art for money's sake.
Yes, and I know we can just run around with the art stamp, stamping everything, saying art all day long, and effectively be as correct as we want to be, because all it takes is one person to say it's art before suddenly gets a round of beret-wearing, wine-swilling critics.
But again, like something being art adds no inherent value.
Not at all.
So let's drop this veneer of like we will be respected once we are in art.
Yeah.
Like let's get rid of that.
And we have games that are out there like Trine and things like that that do a very good job at getting by their one idea, the main core point of what they're trying to get by, and doing it in an interactive medium. But then, on the flip side, there are many games out there that might have tried to be art that maybe would have just been better in another medium.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, actually, ironically, I feel as though the indie community is a little bit more responsible for this than the AAA industry. Because, like, I feel like people just have this inherent, like, since they surround themselves with video game players and, like, all their indie friends are making video games too, well, you want to do what your friends are doing.
Oh, yeah.
And on some level, your friends kind of, like, they don't want to tell you no because they're as excited about this medium as you are. Then
it's art for the sake of art.
Perhaps. I do want to close off by coming back to that idea of academia, though, because like there's a great deal of people that like, and I've read articles by them. In fact, we've read some of those articles on the show. There's some number of people out there that like seem to be like of the opinion that video games and like the way that they work, their inner workings, and how they can be effective as art is this big mystery, and that they prefer that it stay a mystery, and that they just like, it's kind of like TV tropes, right? Like if you go to TV tropes, like on some level, some people feel like they're ruining
everything you'll ever see, because you'll see something in a show and then go, it's this trope. Oh, I've seen this before. And now that they've labeled it, you'll recognize it every time you see it.
But on some level, I don't mind that. I like the idea of being able to intellectually deconstruct a work of art and understand why it works.
And you always yelled at me when I told you what voice actors were and things like that.
Well, that's a little bit different because because the voice actor is actively trying to be someone else, and I want to help him to do that instead of like saying, "Oh, hi, Will Smith."
You know, or the fact that Duo Maxwell was voiced by the same guy who did Tenderheart
Bear. We all know.
I love that. It's great.
Anyway, like, so I guess what it comes down to it, I feel as though there's an unwillingness amongst certain parts of the video game population to even draw any boundaries in the video game world, and the boundaries are important. Like every other form of art has done this, where we deconstruct it and we have like formalistic definitions for things and like certain techniques that we do, and there's a segment of the population. I ran into somebody in a Twitch TV chat room that like had such contempt for the academia of any art, as though like what they were doing was like some sort of like limitation of expression.
Just by labeling it, you are limiting expression. You're going to, like, anytime someone does X, it will always be viewed as X and never as its own thing or what have you.
Or even just like, being able to say this was effective, this was not, and then like for some reason that offends his sensibilities of like, well, who are you to tell me what I like?
There we go. That comes down to the whole beauty, eye of beholder, etc.
I mean, like you can like or not like any art that you want. I mean, that's the subjectivity part of art. But I do feel as though that there is there is another layer of like, what, like how effective was this, even the wine that I was tasting this last week. Like I know what wine I like and don't like now to some degree. I'm still working on that. But like I could never really go so far as to say that, oh well, this is bad wine, because like I just don't have the context or experience. But like I could detect that there's probably something in here that like is very deliberate and very effective, just not something that appeals to me.
Well, and see, there you go. It's the whole idea behind like, what is bad wine at that point? Is it wine that you don't like is bad wine, or are you being told that it's bad wine and that you shouldn't drink it because of X, Y, or Z? It's like, well, if you like it, you like it. It's the whole idea of, perception. This is tap water. This is water that was, pulled from the snow atop the highest peak of Everest. You're being told that it's good, and thus you're going to think it's good. Oh, this is tap water. I don't want to drink tap water. It's the same stuff. It's you're just being told that it's one or the other. And at that point, it comes down to, well, who do you believe? And, shouldn't everyone just like what they like, regardless of having to deal with everybody else's BS?
And I think the first step towards approaching that academia is going to be like the basically the devaluation of the word game. We need to just drop that topic. We just need to like stop saying that, like, if I say that video game XYZ is not a game, like, we need to stop treating that like a value judgment.
I know.
It's getting in our way.
For a fact that people are going to get all up in arms because of, insulting anything you like. It's like saying that, Hefeweizen isn't actually a beer. It's this and this and that. You can't, you eat peanuts. They're not nuts. They're legumes, or what have you. People are going to take offense about everything, but it does seem that gamers are very, very, very protective of the term game for, gamers, as it were.
It is strange, and like on some level, I feel as though the more you fight that, the less that you've kind of been immersed in like the art culture or art history in general. Because like it's very like I feel very strongly that we are going to develop a whole vocabulary for all of this, and we just don't have it yet.
I'm pretty sure there's tons of people out there who'd be like, "There's not art. You can't call it art. Art is such a limiting term. It's expression, because expression is a more is a less limiting term than the word art or whatever." I mean, people are stupid and weird.
I know.
Whatever.
I mean, I guess like
language is stupid and weird. Sorry. I mean that's the inherent nature of being communicative creatures.
Perhaps, but
It happens.
But colloquialisms aside, like, I mean, like, the language can be very useful to us. I mean, like, those of you who are listening for a long time probably know that I, like, at this point in time, ascribe to the four broad definitions of forms that Keith Burgun puts forward, as far as, you know, like, a sandbox into a puzzle, into a contest, into a game, you know, and just like the differences inherent. But the reason why I described it that is because it's so logical to me.
Right.
Like, and it makes sense to divide games that way. And it helps us to design better games when we have words for things and when we have goals. When we know that, like, the puzzle is really, really good at conveying this sort of thing, and that the game is good for, like, this, like, unlimited number of interactions when we design it well.
Right. Whereas, you know, I'm much more famous from people who are listening to the podcast, describing to the much more methodical version of sandwich into bag into lunch bag into backpack. It makes a lot more sense to me.
Okay. Well, I think that's all the arting that we can do for the time being, but I hope that this has somehow given people an appreciation for, like, you know, like, understanding, like, where other forms of art have gone, the process that they've taken, and, like, how it's really, like, if we want to start, like, you know, saying no, putting our foot down, and, like, actually studying art, like, academically, it's really okay. We need to start doing it. Otherwise, we're not going to get very far. We're just going to keep on making modern warfare.
Hey, well, you know what? And for people who like modern warfare, more power to you.
Or we can make something even better than Modern Warfare.
I think we can make Modern Warfare and have games alongside Modern Warfare.
How about we make Modern Warfare without, you know, a prestige system?
You know, at this point, I'm just going to say, you know, that's like saying you can have your amazing fresh roast beef sandwich and artisan bread, and you can have that, and I can have a peanut butter sandwich, and we can both be happy with what we're eating.
And I can call your peanut butter sandwich, you know technically incorrect, but, like, enjoyable on your level.
See, there you go. If that's the pedestal you want to be on, then you'll be there, well within my reticles.
And that's all we have for this week's main topic. So we are going to go back to saving the world for another week. Between now and then, contact us with questions, comments, opinions, shoutouts, give show topics, link news articles, or sound off on this week's Inquisition, which, in case you forgot, is...
When did a simple rules alteration completely change a game?
I'm glad you remembered that little change in the...
I have a really good memory for that stuff.
Send responses to the email at gamingdisquisition@gmail.com.
Reach us on Facebook, facebook.com/thegamingdisquisition, or on the Google+.
Get a hold of us on Twitter at DisquisitorSam.
At DisquisitorMark.
On Twitter.
Tweet.
Thanks and shoutouts this week. Shout out to Joy, who, as I've mentioned many times, has visited me this last week, and we did all sorts of things, and, like, honestly, like, I can't think of a better person that I could have gone to the Seattle Art Museum with, a better person that I could have gone wine tasting with.
Not your girlfriend, not... No.
Yeah, honestly, I her expertise was just something that, like, I don't typically have a chance to talk with other people about.
I'll let that one slide.
I mean, she's just really good at that, and, like, she gave me a lot of insight that, like, kind of helped me understand what was happening in all these artistic ventures. So I'm really appreciative, and, like, a really fun time all around.
Yeah, hey, and shout out to Manny, friend Manny, visiting up from California for the week, meeting people, running around, doing stuff. You know, I'm thinking about approaching him to talk about comic books or something like that, possibly next episode. You know, we'll see about something. You know,
we're gonna have, like, maybe we can have a versus, but with him and with him and Kevin.
Oh, that'll be great. We'll sit back and mediate.
All right, then. Let's see. Thanks to AlanGee for his track Blanka in Brasil.
Yeah, hey, thanks to Sam Dillard for your track Beyond the Glass.
And thanks to Dan and Havidakis for sending us your links this week. Oops. And as always, thanks to all of our musical artist friends for letting us use your work on the show. Your work helps make our show what it is. We will be back 7 days from today to do this crazy thing all over again. Until then, game on, internets.